friends, humans, Disney fans, lend me your ears. Now, we all love the Wreck-It Ralph movies, right? But wait a second, should they be called Ralph in Wonderland instead? Coming up, this fan's theory all about how those two Disney movies have some crazy similarities. Let's chat. Hey guys, Melanie here from Lend Me Your Ears, and we are going to start off as usual with an ear shout out. Aren't these Maleficent ears really cool? These ears are from Sarah Kate, and Sarah Kate had a fun memory about her first ever roller coaster experience. They were at Disney World and she was just tall enough to ride Space Mountain, so her dad was so excited and took her on it, but guess what? Sarah Kate was terrified, and then it took her a long time to warm up to any other roller coasters after that. But don't worry, she's ridden more roller coasters since then. That was just her first roller coaster memory. So, Sarah Kate, thank you so much for lending me your ears. All right, everybody. Now, when Disney released Wreck-It Ralph back in 2012, I believe many others, were struck by the uncanny resemblance that King Candy's character had to the Mad Hatter of Alice in Wonderland that was released in 1951. Now, of course, they didn't look exactly the same, but the mannerisms and the way they were drawn and the voice acting by Alan Tudyk was extremely similar to that of the voice acting done all those years ago by Ed Wynn. And just after doing the tiniest bit of digging, I found an article that said that the creators of Wreck-It Ralph were actually very intentional about this. When they contacted Alan Tudyk to ask him if he could play the character, they said, hey, we want you to sound very much like Ed Wynn, who played the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland. So what that means is that they kind of wanted him to sound a little bit like this. Sorry, that wasn't very good. But you know what? I have a cold, so my voice is a little bit off, okay? But one thing that little bit of research didn't quite unearth was why? Why would they want him to sound like the Mad Hatter? Why would they want this random character in their new movie about video games and video game characters? Why would they want him to sound so much like the Mad Hatter? It was just so very confusing to me. So I decided to think a little bit more deeply about why this may be the case, and my first ever fan theory was born. Aw, happy birthday, little fan theory. Oh, I hope someday you have many, many brothers and sisters. Yeah, probably not. I just totally stumbled onto this out of luck. I've never made a fan theory before and may not ever make one ever again. Plus, this fan theory feels a little bit half-baked. I'm not even sure if I've thought everything through to fruition, so. You probably should have stayed in there a little longer, little fella. So today, I am here to share this little baby fan theory with you, the audience. After viewing the 1951 Alice in Wonderland, Wreck-It Ralph, and Ralph Breaks the Internet, I went ahead and came up with all the different similarities and ties that I thought may have been intentional in binding these two movies together. And maybe together, you and I can help bring this little guy into adulthood. Let's first start by mentioning that I think that the overall premise of all three of these movies is kind of similar. In each movie, we start out with a character who is discontent with their life or their circumstances. In Alice in Wonderland, it is Alice. In Wreck-It Ralph, it is Ralph. And then in Ralph Breaks the Internet, I kind of actually think it's Vanellope. Then in each of the movies, these three characters go off into a different world to try and solve these problems that they have. Alice is bored, and so she goes into Wonderland. Ralph is kind of not digging being a bad guy anymore, so he chases that medal off into Sugar Rush. And Vanellope thinks that she wants a new steering wheel for her game, but in actuality, she goes into the internet to find a new challenge. And you know, one thing that I find interesting is that in Alice in Wonderland and Wreck-It Ralph, both of our main characters kind of get back to reality and accept themselves for who they are, accept what their life is, and that they are exactly who they need to be. But in Ralph Breaks the Internet, Vanellope kind of is like, whatever, I'm doing something new and different with my life. I mean, neither of those concepts are necessarily bad in and of themselves, but you know what? I I don't understand why in Wreck-It Ralph it's no big deal that Penelope doesn't want to go back to her game. That was a major plot point in Wreck-It Ralph. But whatever, I digress. This has nothing to do with anything else. That's just me. So there's that. It seems to me that at the very least we can point out that the premises of all these movies are in fact similar, and that at the very most, maybe, just maybe, the creators of the Wreck-It Ralph movies were actually very intentional about harkening back to that old movie, almost as if they were recreating Alice in Wonderland for today's world. So let's go ahead and start observing some of the similarities that I noticed between all these movies. We're gonna start off and we're gonna list off some similarities from Wreck-It Ralph. At the very get-go, when someone at the beginning of the movie puts a quarter into Ralph's game, it begins on his screen with him going down into a tree stump, then being moved and coming back out of the tree stump in a different location. Now, who else goes into a bottom of a tree and ends up in a different place altogether? Ralph then begins destroying homes. Who else destroys a home? Alice! And I think also I might be able to draw a parallel between the fact that when she is destroying the White Rabbit's home, he's calling her a monster. And Gene also very much calls Wreck-It Ralph a monster in one way or another right before he destroys their cake at the party, right? So that might be a bit of a stretch though. So I won't say that. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about what Ralph is wearing. And what is he wearing? He's wearing overalls. Now, overalls are the garment of choice if you want to kind of cover up everything else you're wearing and not get anything dirty, because when you're wearing overalls, you're in for some messy business. Am I right? Now, what might be the female counterpart of overalls? Besides, of course, overalls, because, girls can wear overalls. It would, of course, be an apron. And who wears an apron? Now, in both Wreck-It Ralph and Ralph Breaks the Internet, the sign on the outside of the arcade says that there is inside a birthday party for Susie. Susie spelled with a V. Litwack must have lost the U. But anyway, when we get into the arcade, we see no evidence of a birthday party. Could it in fact mean that the birthday party was yesterday and the sign is old, making it Susie with a V's unbirthday? All right, that was little stuff, okay? Now I'm really about to blow your mind. When Ralph gets to Sugar Rush, he pretty immediately meets someone who is laying on a tree branch. And this particular someone is, of course, Penelope, but she has the characteristic of being able to kind of disappear and reappear in a different place with her glitch, right? Does that sound like anyone else someone may have met on a tree branch? Cheshire Cat. Yeah, Cheshire Cat. You know what? Penelope even strikes some extremely similar poses to the Cheshire Cat who Alice meets on a tree branch, and also has the ability to disappear and reappear in different places. Then, who's your favorite tall, impulsive, wears her emotions on her sleeve type of gal with the tiny sweet husband? Is it over here at couple number 1 or over here at couple number 2? Obviously, Calhoun and Felix are better. She's the bad guy. But what? And I was also struck by how extremely similar Sour Bill's eyes are to the Dormouse's eyes in Alice in Wonderland. Now, are they both just suffering from insomnia or suffering from extreme disinterest? The world may never know. Then, of course, rounding things out is the similarity that I started with. How extremely similar King Candy's character, or Turbo, as we find out later, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Wreck-It Ralph, there's the similarities between King Candy and the Mad Hatter. Now, I don't know if they did this because ultimately you find out that the Turbo King Candy character had in fact gone crazy or mad, you might say. Or if, like I said, this was all intentional. This was all intentional to lay the groundwork to really kind of connect these two movies. Now moving on to Ralph Breaks the Internet. And the thing that really got this entire fan theory rolling for me was when I went to view this movie, having seen Wreck-It Ralph and seeing the King Candy similarities with the Mad Hatter. I was kind of going into this movie thinking, I wonder if they'll have any other fun throwbacks to Alice in Wonderland. And guys, there was one that just jumped off the screen and slapped me across the face. I'm wondering if it did the same thing for you too, but we'll get to that a little bit later. We're gonna go into Ralph Breaks the Internet chronologically and look at some of these similarities. So guys, first off, again, like I previously stated, I think that the premise for this movie starts with Vanellope being discontent with where she's at. She feels like everything's the same old, and she's getting, for lack of a better word, bored with Sugar Rush, right? So when they go to find out how they get into the internet, who pops up but a little tiny digital Mr. Litwack, right? And they follow him into a tunnel. I mean, this to me was so similar to Alice following the white rabbit into the rabbit hole. And then as they're, just going through this tunnel, the cord that connects to the internet, and they get into the internet, and there's just all these amazing, different, wonderful things that they are seeing. That reminded me a little bit of a rabbit hole type of an experience also. And I think now is as good a time as any to mention that in this sequence, Ralph he's just too big. And this happens a few times throughout Ralph Breaks the Internet, that he is just too big for his surroundings and the internet in general. And who else happens to become too big quite often? Alice. Now, I realize that in Ralph Breaks the Internet, this could kind of be more of a nod to, metaphorically speaking, that Ralph is just too big, doesn't fit in, not supposed to be in the internet, but I couldn't help but notice a similarity to Alice in Wonderland. And does anyone else think that JP Spamley looks a whole lot like Bill the Lizard from Alice in Wonderland? I mean, they both have kind of the green skin tone. They're both wearing very similar clothes. Now, granted, that is pretty much where their similarities die. Their characters really aren't similar in any way, shape, or form. Except that JP Spamley is voiced by someone whose name is what? Bill? Coincidence? Mr. and Mrs. Hader, congratulations, it's a boy. What will you name him? Thanks, Doc. We think we're gonna name him Bill after our favorite character from Alice in Wonderland, with the hopes and dreams that someday he might voice a character in an animation that looks just like Bill. Okay, yeah, it probably is a coincidence, but I mean, anything's possible, right? And now I'd like to mention that in both films, Wreck-It Ralph and Ralph Breaks the Internet, there's lots of signage pointing different directions. And what other movie has signs pointing in all different directions? Alice in Wonderland. Coincidence? Yeah, again, maybe that might just be a coincidence. Guys, Ralph Breaks the Internet even has its own Queen of Hearts. Now, granted, she's not the villain or the bad guy, but I think it would be very fair to call, yes, a Queen of Hearts. Now let's talk about Vanellope's Slaughter Race song that she sings. I kind of thought that the premise of that song had undertones that were extremely similar to Alice's World of My Own song that she sings in her movie. And guess what Alice does at the end of her song? She ponders as she looks into a body of water. Now, I will write this one off as a coincidence, since the Disney princesses in Ralph Breaks the Internet actually poke fun at the fact that this is a common device used in Disney movies with their female characters, but I just thought that was kind of funny. And now, finally, let's talk about that part in Ralph Breaks the Internet that literally came through the screen and slapped me in the face. Oh, really? Again? Ugh. And I am speaking, of course, of Double Dan. Now, did anyone else go in watching Wreck-It Ralph and think, oh my goodness, we had King Candy and the Mad Hatter in the first movie, and now Double Dan? He's the caterpillar, guys. He's the caterpillar. Now, first of all, they of course look very similar. And you might be thinking, well, what about his little brother, Dan's little brother that you're not supposed to look at, right? You know, the caterpillar doesn't have a face growing out of him, but the caterpillar does seem to have parts of him that operate independently of his own consciousness. Like when his hands are clenching the rope of the pipe and he has to stop it. Or his feet that are having a really hard time climbing up onto that leaf and he's gotta pull him up there, right? So I think that is really similar to Double Dan's little brother. Then guys, get this. The first lines of both the caterpillar and Double Dan, well, outside of the caterpillar's weird vowel song, A-I-O-U. I'm hilarious. Their first words are the same. It's
Who are you?
Who are you?
what? I mean, this has to be intentional, am I right? And then to top it all off, there's the fact that the thing that Ralph gets from Double Dan, that virus, that insecurity virus, it makes Ralph grow into a giant Ralph. Ultimately, am I right? And who else gets something from the caterpillar that makes her grow to be a giant? You know the answer. So that's it. That's all the similarities. And what does it all mean? Well, I'll tell ya. I really actually have no clue what it all means. I mean, I told you guys at the beginning of this that I thought this fan theory was a little bit half-baked, and I didn't quite get there. I mean, usually at the end of these fan theories, they're all tied up neatly with a little bow that says something like, and all of this because Ralph and Alice are actually in the same cinematic universe. No, they're not. I really have no idea why all these similarities exist between the 2-3 films. I mean, I guess my biggest question coming out of this fan theory would be, was it intentional? Did the creators of the Wreck-It Ralph movies over there at Disney, were they intentional about rewriting Alice in Wonderland for a more tech-savvy modern world? So please let me know your thoughts. I feel like someone could take this fan theory and just do amazing things with it, take it farther than I ever could. I feel like this is just the beginning of this fan theory. What did I miss? I'm sure I missed something. And you know what? There's also a very real possibility that all of this has been hashed out before and I am just really late to the game. If that is the case, I apologize. So guys, leave your thoughts, questions, additions to the fan theory in the comments section below. I want to hear from you. I want to know what you think about all these similarities between these films. And if you enjoyed this video and are a fan of all things Disney, please consider subscribing by clicking that subscribe button and the bell right beside it. That way you will be up to date when we drop any fresh videos here at Lend Me Your Ears. And please consider lending me your ears. That's right, if you would like your ears featured in one of our episodes and you will receive a shout out, leave a comment in the section below. We will get you all the information that you need so you can send us your ears. I'll wear them and we will send them right back to you. This is Melanie at Lend Me Your Ears and we'll chat again soon.